if you've ever poured concrete or done that kind of, but it's pretty backbreaking.
Yeah.
Pretty much working full time, being a full time athlete and a full time student. I was burning the candle at both ends, but it just teaches you that, like, if you need to make it happen yourself, to, who you going to rely on, you got to rely on yourself. And my dad, he had a wrestling scholarship to go to Arizona, but you have a pregnant wife, disabled when he was young, that was hard, really hard on my parents, especially my mom being, 16, raising this kid. He ended up passing away when he was 13. So I was 8, my brother was 3. So that was hard on my parents. Shortly after that, some parents might look at it as like, why is this happening to me? Is there a God? I came from the athletic world,
Right.
Strength conditioning, collegiate. And then you start working with a, 60-year-old woman that's had a hip replacement that wants to bitch about her husband.
Yes.
You're like, well, how are we going to find this woman's 1 RM on a back squat? Like, everything that you've learned, it's kind of out the door. But my mom actually passed away at an early age. She had a non-cancerous tumor on her bowel that they removed, and she had a C. diff infection in the hospital. She ended up passing away at 53. I was 32 at the time, so this would be like 2007.
So thank you for joining us. I'm here with Michael Rosas. Call him affectionately Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
He oversees a beautiful facility. I got to say, I've been all over the country. I've trained all over the world, kind of traveled with my life, and then had opportunities to go to some different functions and events where I've seen some amazing places. And in my opinion, Excel is one of the best well-fitted I've ever seen. Obviously the best in the area.
Yeah, for sure.
And the team here, I've watched the evolution of your team. So my background is when I came here to Utah, I had the opportunity to interview, coming right from Equinox, which is a top-notch facility. Yeah. I had the opportunity to interview and was lucky enough to get on your team here. And so I've watched the facility grow and develop. I've watched the team grow and develop over that time. And now that I've been doing my own thing, I still train a little bit, but just watching that maturation process that this went through. And then when you took over at the helm and the growth of the team and development there. So I want to kind of give the viewer. So again, what we're trying to do is just get into this idea of what it's like being a personal trainer, like how you even came about this, and what skills, what abilities, what things drew you to it, and what you've learned over time. But what I'd like to go now is just give us a little background, like who you are, where'd you come from?
Okay, yeah, that's pretty easy. So not too far from here, I came from a small town called Kemmer, Wyoming. Southwest Wyoming is about an hour and a half from here. So a town of only like 2,000, about 2,500 people actually. So born and raised there. Both my parents were born and raised there. Went to high school there. High school athlete, wrestling, track, football. Got a college scholarship to go to University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota. So
okay. Is that a smaller school?
It's a smaller school. It was an NAI school at the time. Now it's a Division II school. But I played football up there. Originally went there to wrestle, but just played football instead. Kind of dropped off on the wrestling thing.
Okay.
Played football up there for 4 years. We had a pretty successful team. We went to the semifinals my sophomore year of the national playoffs. So had some success there. Then at the end, I graduated 4 years, studied athletic training. I knew that I kind of didn't want to go that path with athletic training. It's kind of a hard road. You're on a sports team. You're the first one there.
Yeah.
Last
What is,
one to leave.
For people who don't know, really kind of like what athletic training is, like what is the base? So you're saying.
So it's, prevention and rehabilitation of athletic injury. So, if, you're there before the athletes show up, heat, ice, stretch them out. They kind of have any injuries, you're helping treat that, tape. And then, post workout, ice baths, compression, massage, any kind of treatment that athletes might need based upon injuries or, potential injuries or things they've had in the past. So it's a lot of hours, not a lot of pay. You have to be very educated. A lot of times you have to have a graduate degree to even work in the field. They're athletic trainers at various levels. They're at hospitals. Most high school teams have them on staff now.
Yeah.
So it's an in-demand profession, but it's a grueling profession.
Yeah.
So,
what was the draw for you there? So you had just gone through, you graduated high school, you went to a 4-year school, played 4 years of football. What position were you in?
I was outside linebacker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're hitting people.
Hitting people, yeah. Yeah. So
that seems to match your personality.
Yeah, it was back in the day when it was like, I think the game's changed quite a bit now, and
Okay.
I wish it had changed back then. But it was like, I wasn't really a starter a lot of the time, so I was second team defense. So second team defense, first team offense, and just going full speed. So,
Okay.
banging your head, got a couple injuries, got plenty of concussions. Uh, don't think there's any long term damage. I hope there's not. A lot of people would probably say that there is,
Yeah.
but yeah, so played football up there for 4 years. But yet, my whole evolution of, what kind of put me into this field was, mediocre student. My dad was a wrestling coach. So there was, my parents wanted me to be academically, like all of us, they want us to get straight A's. But,
Sure. Yeah.
with my dad being a coach, my mom was very athletic, sports was kind of the everything. So,
Okay.
I trained, I lifted weights with my dad. That was a good bonding experience there. And then when I got to high school, my freshman year, I was one of the only guys on the team that were really lifting.
Mm.
There was certain awards. If you came so many days in the summer, you'd get an award for the who spent the most
Yeah,
team.
like the time in the gym, or
Yeah,
like certain weight clubs and stuff.
yeah. But I was the only person on my entire football team that got that.
Really?
And our football team was garbage. We had been on like I can't remember what it was, like a 4-year losing streak.
Okay.
And so
All
when
right.
my class things transitioned, and we got a new football coach, and he was all about the weight room, and so my sophomore, junior, and senior year, we had this new coach, and he just instilled, the guys that are in the weight room are the guys that are going to be playing. And so I was already doing that. So a lot of other guys bought in, and I really saw the changes, and not just like the physical changes, but the mental and the camaraderie that the strength training brought to the team. And, we rose to the top. We ended up winning state championship my senior year.
Wow.
And so it was really a good foundation, and I also had a teacher in high school. She just taught anatomy and physiology for the hell of it. But I really got pulled into that, the anatomy and physiology. It was like something that just came easy. It was like, getting 10 on a 10 out of 10 on everything.
Yeah.
It really interests me. So the combination of the strength training and what it did for me, and also the science behind it, learning the body, and I didn't quite know the exercise science, like why we do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So the athletic training, I was kind of thinking about maybe going into physical therapy.
Which is common. I hear that
Yeah.
so many times from people who end up in the personal training field.
Yeah.
That
But it's,
they had looked at a field similar to that.
yeah, at the time, and this is like the mid '90s, late '90s. Physical therapy was like through the roof. Physical therapy programs are actually harder to get into than medical school programs.
Mm.
And I did an internship with some physical therapists. Working with older adults, working with athletes, and just general population. And I really, I didn't really enjoy that. And even the conversations I would have with the physical therapists, they're like, yeah, it can be a rewarding job, but at the same time, you're dealing with an injured population. A lot of times they don't want to be here.
Yeah.
So it's not, sometimes it can be good and sometimes it cannot be so good.
Yeah.
So I kind of looked at that, and I'm like, I want to be more on the performance side, athletic training. You're helping the athletes. I actually wanted to be training the athletes. So I decided to go to graduate school. I applied to University of Utah, Wyoming, and Utah State. And I got into all three programs, but University of Wyoming was the only school that gave me an assistantship. So they pretty much were paying me to go to graduate school. So
Oh, wow.
that was kind of a no-brainer. Plus, I was a resident of Wyoming, so I got in-state tuition there.
Yeah.
So I did 2 years of exercise sports science with a emphasis in exercise physiology and fitness leadership at University of Wyoming. I was the head anatomy physiology GA there. I worked with the strength conditioning program a little bit while I was at University of Wyoming as well. So
That's cool.
I feel like it gave me a pretty good basis to get into the strength and conditioning world.
Yeah.
And so my goal was to try to get on with a collegiate team, but I quickly learned that that's kind of a good old boy network, and
A lot of times it's who you know.
it is. It's a lot who you know. So, you can be the most educated guy in the room, but if, you have an ex-player that was a hell of a baller, and, a lot of the guys on the team resonate with him,
Yeah.
even though he doesn't know anything about strength training.
Well, we've seen that. I mean,
Yeah.
you can jump on YouTube, at least back in the day. I think a lot of the programs, and there's just so much information now to where people have been forced to step up their game.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's still some schools and universities, maybe more so the smaller ones, that maybe don't have as tight of a training routine.
Yeah.
But it used to be, you'd go to these programs and see this stuff, and you'd be amazed at the poor quality of exercise programming they'd have with
Yeah.
D2 schools
Oh yeah.
were very poor.
And I will say, at the University of Wyoming, they had great strength conditioning there. The University of Utah that I've had like partaked in up there a little bit. They have great strength conditioning up there as well. So I was always in a pretty good realm as far as that. Like, but just what you said, like if you start dropping down like Division 2, Division 3, NAI, it's almost non-existent. It's almost up to you to kind of, they'll point you in the direction. They'll give you a program, but there's no like monitoring really. It's
Yeah.
kind of just up to you.
Well, all right. That was a great intro, but there's so much in there to unpack, right?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's go back to like high school. One thing that you kind of touched on real briefly is you mentioned that um, kind of that you emulated and started to learn maybe even before high school, your dad, and he was lifting, working out, and
Yeah.
him being a coach. Did you also have brothers and sisters, or?
Yeah, so I have a younger brother. I had an older brother that passed away at a young age, but yeah, my younger brother he was a wrestler as well. So my dad actually coached the counter wrestling team for close to 40 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so he was a long term dude. So he's well known in the state of Wyoming and even down here in Utah. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
So
pretty.
what was that like? Like again, being a kid, kind of starting to become a man, transitioning into high school, getting involved more and more athletics. It sounds like you've been wrestling from a young age.
Yeah, I started when I was 5.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's wrestling is the probably one of the world's hardest sports. It's demanding, it's grueling. You don't have a lot of fanfare. Pretty much getting your head rubbed in the mat. And in my early years, I didn't have a lot of success.
Okay.
It took me. And it's pretty. It's not very. I don't know, motivating when you're constantly getting beat. But with your dad being the coach, you feel like you have to rise up, and that's what we kind of did over time. Me and some of the younger guys, we stepped up our game, and we ended up being a pretty good wrestling team. So
I mean, just going on a surface level here and that, I've kind of seen that consistently, right? And even in the introduction where I talked about the growth of the facility and the changes here, there were some low points in the
yeah,
facility. And it's obviously not at that point anymore. And there were some challenges with the team as well.
yeah,
But then you talk about just listening to your quick overview of your story, I could see multiple times to where you've gone into a culture and been a part of a catalyst to change.
yeah. It's been a good thing. I've always been placed in high school. I was in a leadership position. I was the football team captain, wrestling team captain. And we had weekly team captains when I was in North Dakota, and I was one of those as well. So I've always been put in a leadership position. You know, Me personally, I've never really wanted to be in that position, but it is pretty rewarding. And I've learned to kind of, you know, grow from that, and also, help other people grow from that. So it's been a pretty good experience for me.
Why do you think you end up in those positions?
I don't, I just feel like I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but I've always, when I gauge I'm competitive, even, you know, somebody, if we're trying to see who has the most volume in the gym,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm going to beat you, but I'm going to try my hardest to do that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I've always tried to keep my volume, my production, my performance as high as I can, because I think that's, it's kind of fun to do that. That's even though we're not in sports anymore, that's still the competitive nature.
Yeah.
You work out with somebody, it's fun to work out with your buddy. It's fun to challenge them. And I feel like it's the same in the working environment as well. Like, let's push it. Let's see what we can grow. Let's see what numbers we can hit,
Yeah.
and the whole team profits from that. And so it's been a good experience.
Yeah. It's obviously infectious,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We have a great team right now. Uh, I just honestly, I can't believe how good things are going. You know, and I think Nate's been very good. Nate's the owner of the facility. He's put me in a position. He's kind of let me, pick and choose whoever I want to build my team. And he's been really good to support my decisions with that. It doesn't always work out, but for the most time, we're pretty selective on who we choose.
Okay.
And so, you look for people that self-manage really well. You don't have to babysit them. You don't have to, you know, watch what they're doing, make sure they're doing things right, that they're not going to hurt their clients. We don't have any of that. And if we do ever have any of that, we put a stop to that pretty quick. Try to
Okay.
modify it. If it doesn't get changed, then we'll put a stop to that pretty quick.
So with that, like, how do you? How do you build your team? Are you just putting out ads, or are you at the point where you're recruiting people from places?
No, that's a good place to be. There are plenty of really great facilities in this area, and a lot of the people that have worked in this other facilities, got their start here.
Yeah,
So not only do we have a great team here, but we've also created great team members that have their own facilities elsewhere. So,
yeah,
a lot of us got our start here. We train together as a unit, and it's not just me, teaching them. It's us just collaborating and teaching one another. Seeing, one of the female trainers might do a cool move. That's awesome, man. What are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Explain it to me, and then pretty soon we're all integrating that movement. So it's a great culture where we learn from one another.
hmm
Egos, in the personal training world.
Well, there's always egos.
Yeah, there's always egos, no matter what industry you're in, but the fitness industry is really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, one thing that always amazes me about the fitness industry itself, and like one thing that I have to, for myself, like kind of put myself in check or accept, is the vanity aspect,
Yeah.
right? You're like a like even bodybuilders and stuff like that, especially our fitness athletes, you're effectively a walking billboard to your like self indulgence
Yeah.
in that, right? And so there's a balance. There's a balance of being fit, feeling strong, fulfilling yourself, but then also remembering not the whole world revolves around that and
Yeah.
you, because you're in a facility surrounded by mirrors. Your effectiveness in a trainer gets judged by the clients you're working with
Yeah.
and your physical appearance.
Yeah.
So you have to keep your physical appearance on point and keep that. It's like you're on stage when you're
Yeah.
out,
Well, that's
right?
exactly it. And it's like if you're on stage and you're not performing, you're sitting down on a box, you're drinking your coffee, you're, you
Yeah.
know, doing something because you are. People are on the treadmills, they're watching you, and you always want to portray yourself as like, if there's a potential client, I want to be on my best. I want to be doing my best so I could potentially recruit that person.
Yeah.
But if you're kind of, laying around, kind of look like you don't have much energy yourself, you're not engaged, then who's going to want to work with that?
Yeah.
So you do have to play the part. You have to look the part. Me personally, I was going to do this for 1 year, just have fun with it, and then get the hell out of here. Try to,
So
get a
where did you?
sales job.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back then, because you brought up again graduating, doing the GA assist or
Yeah.
what was it again?
I was a GA, anatomy physiology GA at the
Okay.
University of Wyoming.
And working within that department.
Yeah.
So let's go back there. Where did you go next?
Well, that was the thing. It's like, so, we actually started as a graduate student at the University of Wyoming. We started getting recruited by some pharmaceutical companies.
Oh.
So, and that was the back in the day when that was like one of the top jobs around. So we, even though we were, exercise physiology students, we were kind of all going for these pharmaceutical sales jobs.
Okay.
And, we kind of, a lot of us were interviewing for that, and it wasn't my deal. And I went through a few interviews and I didn't get hired. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to take the next step, and I'm just going to try to actually use my degree. So I wanted to enter the personal training world. And the thing with the personal training world is, well, I got to get out of Wyoming. There's 500,000 people in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah. Well, you said you grew up in a small town with 3,000?
Yeah, like it was 3,000 back then. It's actually kind of dying now. There's only 2,000 people there.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so it's going the
I
other
was
way.
going to say, because I had 950 seniors at my graduation.
Yeah,
ceremony.
we had one of the biggest graduating classes, and I think we had like 92 or 93.
Wow.
Yeah, the year below me, they actually had the biggest. They had like 95 or 98 or something like that. But it is a small town. But it was a great place to grow up. I mean, we can talk about, here in Salt Lake, and I'm sure this is a different tangent, but, you can be a big fish in a small pond up there. And when you come down to a bigger city like Salt Lake, I look at the athletics down here and what kids get involved with. And it's like, you pick one sport and that's a year-round thing. But up there, it's like we could play baseball, you could do track, you could wrestle, you play football. We all did all those different things. So, and it was a great time. We didn't have to hyper-focus down, in these cities. It's a lot more competitive. And if you don't get hyper-focused into one, domain, you're going to be left behind. So
Sure.
it was good growing up in that scenario. And I feel like we all got well versed in all different kinds of athletics and kind of got to hone what we're good at.
I saw that even with my oldest daughter, like 9 and 10-year-old soccer. She was invited to be on this traveling team. And then the commitment that started to occur with that, it was like all year round training.
It's like, I mean, I'm sure you want your daughter to excel and rise up, but it's like you're missing out on a lot of other things that,
Right.
that she could be good at, that she might probably would enjoy, maybe even enjoy more. But
Yeah.
if you pigeonhole yourself in that one thing, that's pretty limiting.
Yeah. So then you go from, okay,
Yeah.
you
So
say,
yeah,
I'm going to be a personal trainer.
yeah,
I'm
that
going to
was,
try. You do the pharmaceutical route. You
yeah,
didn't get brought on. So you're like, well, all right,
yeah,
let me see what else there is.
yeah,
And you went into personal training and you identified that obviously you had a pretty small group to potentially pull clients from. So you needed to go
you
somewhere
need
where
to
there
go
was
to a
more
bigger market.
population.
Yeah. So that was the deal. And it was like my two choices were either Denver or Salt Lake. I grew up not too far from Salt Lake. So that kind of made more sense, closer to home, was more familiar, smaller town, city, I should say. Um, Mountains are right here, kind of like the culture. It was a pretty clean area. So I chose Salt Lake. And, back then, late 90s, early 2000s, the one gym that comes to mind was like 24-hour fitness.
Okay.
So I was like, well, there's 24-hour fitness all over Salt Lake. So I applied there. They make you take tests and everything. And so I moved down here ready to work. And, uh, I hadn't finished my graduate degree. I still had that. I didn't do the thesis route. I did the Plan B paper. So I took more coursework and I just did a literature review. So I hadn't finished my literature review. So I didn't have my master's. I only had my undergrad at the time. So 24-hour said, well, what is your undergraduate degree? And I told them athletic training. And just like I explained to you, what athletic training is, the manager of the gym said, I've never heard of athletic training. And I was like, well, it's a 4-year degree. You need, and I
Yeah.
had my NSCA, CSCS, which you had to have a 4-year degree to sit for.
Yeah.
And I should relay that to him. And he's like, so this manager said, well, he kind of said he didn't believe me that I had my 4-year degree. So he wanted to see my actual like transcripts and grades.
Okay.
So that was pretty off-putting.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, this isn't the company for me.
Yeah.
So I pretty much walked out of there and I opened up the yellow pages and looked at gyms. There was one down the road, Bally's, which that's not even around anymore.
No.
I walked in and I talked to the training manager. And he said, you don't want to work in this place. They built a new gym down the street called Excel Fitness.
Oh, really? So he tipped you off to
He tipped me off where he could have
Okay.
put me on his team. Well, I did end up being on his team for a little bit. I came here and Emmett was the head personal trainer at the
No
time.
way.
Yeah. So asked Emmett for a job. He's like, I just hired a few people. So come back in, a month or two. So I checked up a month later. So we don't need anybody yet. And 2 months later, he says, yeah, we can bring you on.
Well, again, there's that persistence, right? You
Yeah.
talked about your persistence and that not having initial success and sticking with it.
Yeah. But, and I will backtrack a little bit, I think, one thing that my dad both of my parents really instilled, and both with me and my brother, was a really good work ethic. From the time we were really young, we had a ton of chores, 1 hour of cartoons on Saturday, and then it was shut off, and we were either going up to our ranch, working out on my dad's property, working on our yard. We were busy all the time. My dad put us to work. And then when I turned 13 years old, you're not even legal to be employed. My dad shipped me off to my aunt's ranch down at Vernal. So I
Okay.
worked all summer there,
What was that?
that was driving tractors, just helping my
Cool.
uncle with the operations of the ranch. But I did that for a summer in 13, and then 14, I did the same thing. And, I didn't get paid, but my aunt bought my school clothes for me. So,
Hey,
but,
there you go.
it was just developing, this is what you got to do. And then when I turned 15, my dad took me to a concrete crew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was, so those, I don't know if you've ever poured concrete or done that kind of, but it's pretty backbreaking
Yeah,
work.
I know the labor's tough.
Yeah.
I think my first job, actually paid job, was working in a grocery store as a stock guy.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I did at 15 and a half or something like that. I think
Yeah,
that's the first I could,
Yeah.
whenever I could work in Ohio.
I was making like $4 an hour doing like the hardest labor I've ever done,
Yeah.
in, small town Wyoming where OSHA and certain work rules do not apply.
Do not apply.
Guys are shooting nail guns at you, throwing things at you. So I was scared out of my mind, but so I worked my ass off,
Yeah.
but even if, it was pretty rewarding, at age 15, doing that kind of work, roofing, pouring concrete, building houses, actually seeing something that you built like with your own hands. So it gave me a lot of, pride, working that hard, and it just made you feel pretty good about yourself. And I like that feeling. So that work ethic, I think I got instilled at a young age.
It's funny to hear you talk about it. It makes me think of like the stuff I've done. And probably the thing I was most prideful of, or the thing I enjoyed, or the best time in my life as far as a work kind of life balance, when I was working I was on a weed whacker crew.
Yeah.
In between the summers off of college, like I would take the summer off and go back home and drive around in like an old, like short bus that
Yeah.
you'd transport people on with like three other guys. We get dropped off at the different schools. Our school system was huge. And literally we'd walk around with these huge industrial weed whackers, weed whacking them before the mowers.
Yeah.
And we were on a regular cycle. And as soon as I would get off work, I'd go hit the gym and then I'd hit dinner. I'd watch TV for like an hour, go to bed and get up again early in the
Yeah.
morning. And it was like the best.
Yeah.
I
That's what,
loved it.
yeah. So, and it is. It's like, it's the work, you put in hard work, you feel good about yourself. And we would do the same. I mean, do back-breaking work all day long, but then as
Yeah.
a team, you would lift in the afternoon. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, I've been pouring concrete all day. I still have concrete on my arms, but you still show up at the gym and get your weight training workout in. Times were a lot different back then, a lot more
Yeah.
energy, a lot more stamina. Couldn't do that nowadays. But that was also another learning thing, as a young man, working construction with a lot of these older guys that maybe they wanted to do it. Most of them probably didn't really like doing it, so they would
Yeah.
they would relay to you like, hey, I'm here because I made some bad choices. I'm here because there was no opportunity for me. If there's opportunity for you, you should pursue that, because
Yeah.
this will make an old man out of you, and it's not really a rewarding job. I loved it when I was a young man, but I listened to those guys and be like, yeah, I better get an education. I better have something else to rely on. So
And you're a father now too, right?
yeah,
How
yeah.
many children do you
I
have?
have two kids, a daughter, 8 years old, and a son, 5 years old.
Okay.
Yeah,
And it's got to be a world different, right?
yeah, it
Between
is.
what you've built up for yourself and your family versus it sounds like what your experience was and where you
Yeah.
grew up from. Obviously, the cities, the times, technology.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed for sure. Yeah, living down here, it's a lot different. You know, growing up in Wyoming, we had that small town. We rode our bikes everywhere. If you had to go 2 miles to your friend's house, that you got on your bike and rode it. My daughter lives a quarter mile from the school, and it's like you get frowned upon if you let your kid walk to school nowadays. They're
Yeah.
like, what's this little girl doing walking by herself with a backpack, walking to school?
Yeah.
Just times are a lot different. Parents have to rein things in a little bit more. I don't know.
Not,
I like the old way, but it's a
well,
for
that's one thing that it's interesting because I don't think I'm curious. Like for my daughters, I have a 5-year-old and a 14-year-old, and I've just tried to provide and give them all the stuff and take care of them and always make sure everything was easy for them.
yeah,
And part of me wonders like if that is really kind of been a part of a disservice as
yeah,
well. And like, are they picking up enough of the ethic or the work ethic and the things that through my example versus what they've actually had experience with
yeah,
to where they'll continue that? I'm hopeful my oldest, she's just turned 14 and now she's getting a job and she's putting money away in this little 401k
yeah. It's
program we
great.
have.
Yeah,
But there's some of those things that I see. But then when I sit down and I listen to you and think about my childhood and what I went through, it's like, man, there's so much that life experience that I had that I don't feel children are getting now. And
yeah.
it's like, how do you give that to your
Yeah, and
kids?
my parents were young when they had, my mom had my brother when she was 16, and then she had me when she was 21. So I had pretty young parents.
Hmm.
So having young parents is great. They have a lot of energy. There might not be the best parents, but I mean, who at if you're raising a kid at 16 to 21, who's going to really be the best parent? I mean, you're going
Yeah.
to do as good as you can. But
Well,
yeah,
I think it turned out all right.
yeah, yeah, there was, nothing's ever really easy, but as long as you keep your trajectory going in the same direction. But yeah, my dad, there was responsibility. You work, you save your money, you buy your own school clothes. You want we wore those ugly jeans, those turbos back in the day. They were like $100 back in the 90s. That's probably like 200, like $500
Yeah, I was
nowadays.
gonna say,
And
yeah.
so I'd work my ass off and I'd buy these fancy clothes. And I spent so much money on clothes when I was in high school. I even think now, like now that I'm a grown man and I have, kids, 8-year-old, 5-year-old, my wife, it's like I'm shopping at Costco now for my clothes, making a lot more money. But I'm like, yeah, man, that's not important. I don't need to wear those ugly ass jeans anymore. I'll wear some
Yeah.
Kirkland shorts. I don't give a damn.
They got some decent stuff at
Yeah,
Costco, man.
yeah,
They
I
do.
agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was, I think holding your kids accountable for things. When I went to school, I played football in the spring or in the fall, And then spring hit, the spring semester, my dad's like, yeah, well, you're not playing football in the spring. So he's sending me $100 a month. So the $100 a month is going away. And I'm like, well, Dad, we have spring ball. We practice just as much in the spring.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, that $100 is just not there anymore.
Hmm.
So it was like, well, what do I do now? I had no spending cash.
Yeah.
So I had to get another job. So I was pretty much working full time, being a full time athlete and a full time student. So, I feel like I was running, I was burning the candle at both ends, but it just teaches you that, like, if you need to make it happen yourself, who you're going to rely on, you've got to rely on yourself.
Yeah.
And I look back at my dad and I'm like, you know what? He could easily kept throwing me 100, $200 a month. But what would that have done for me? That, it wouldn't have made me force me out of my comfort zone. It wouldn't have made me go work that nighttime job, to earn that extra cash. And, as a college athlete, I had a full-time job, so I had a little bit of cash, and I really liked how that felt. I'll open up more. I can take a girl on a date. I can go out to dinner. Before I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So it kind of built me up and gave me confidence. Like, I can make this happen on my own.
Yeah. It's amazing those things that you see as barriers or nuisances or like life-ending type situations when you're a teenager and you go through this stuff and it's like the worst. And then now sitting where you're at, you realize how much it taught you about your life.
Yeah.
And how, as you gain life experience, like those things are just so trivial, but they also gave you the confidence to face the
They
greater
do. Yeah, they
challenges you
really
face
do.
now.
Yeah, and I've even told my wife, even, if this gym was to close tomorrow, I'm not worried about that. We could, I could pivot instantly and make, whether it's construction, whether it's sales, whether find another gym, start my own gym, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident. I know I can make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
And that just comes again from these life lessons.
yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned your family and you real briefly touched on growing up in the town and then yourself and a younger brother and you
Yeah.
had another brother who passed.
Yeah.
So
he was born, he was disabled when he was young, that was hard, really hard on my parents, especially my mom being, 16, raising this kid. My dad, you know, he had a wrestling scholarship to go to Arizona, but, you have a pregnant wife, in high school. So it kind of really, he went down to Arizona for a little bit, but it really changed everything. He had to get back home. He had to be with my mom. He had to, raise this disabled son. And so it really kind of,
was that their first
that was
child?
their first child.
Okay.
So that kind of really changed both of their trajectory. My dad wasn't able to go to college. So, they struggled back in the day.
Yeah.
But, he made it happen. They moved back to my hometown, raised my brother. They had me. They were nervous to have me because, the first kid was disabled.
Sure.
So that's, was one of the biggest reliefs when I was born and I wasn't disabled.
Yeah.
Some people might disagree with that.
Yeah. No, I wanted to keep it serious. No,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, yeah, I can imagine being a parent and going through that experience. Like my daughter was born with Hirschsprung's disease.
Yeah.
And so they told me when she was born that within 24 hours, they were taking her in for emergency exploratory surgery. They thought she had effectively had this connective tissue. I think it was called a malrotated. The diagnosis would have been a malrotated. I can't remember, but essentially the connective tissue that your small intestines kind of fall along as you grow and develop would have choked off the blood supply to her small intestines. And so she would have been born without small intestines. And then she would have died. And that's essentially the pitch they're given to me at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, not ideal. Yeah, it's horrible.
So then when I did have my second daughter, another concern of mine was like, okay, is she going to have this Hirschsprung's disease? Is she going to have to go through this? And so I can understand how that must have been heavy on your parents on their
it was hard. And he ended up passing away when he was 13. So I was 8, my brother was 3. So that was hard on my parents. Kind of changed a lot of things. We were, I was born and raised Catholic, very active in the church. Shortly after that, some parents might look at it as like, why is this happening to me? Is there a God? This and that, we kind of fell away from the church a little bit and, had some really good conversations with my dad at a young age, and kind of where his mindset was, how he felt. And my mindset and my feelings towards religion kind of fell right alongside with him. We still kind of partook in the Catholic Church, but we just decided it really wasn't for us anymore.
Yeah.
So
There's always, so every time I sit down, faith and religion seem to come up. And it's something for me that I wasn't someone who was exposed
yeah,
to a religious sect when I was growing up. My parents, I think, were Protestant and Presbyterian or something, Lutheran and Protestant. That's what
yeah,
it was. And so, but I didn't have any experience going to church. They went to church every Sunday. They had very organized religion, and I didn't have any of that exposure. But going through the process, actually, like I mentioned with my daughter, all of a sudden I became this person of like identifying a faith
yeah.
system. And so, how did that talk a little bit about that? Like when you fell away from the church, what does that mean for you?
Not, I mean, me personally, dude, when I grew up in that, it just felt so repetitious in my life. Go every Sunday. I just felt like there was something better we could be doing. I didn't like the routine of the church. It was all very systematic. And if you've been to a Catholic mass, it's very, and I didn't, a lot of my buddies, they enjoyed it. They would go in there, seeing your friends, getting to hang out afterwards. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah,
And it was for me personally, for falling away from the church. I was just kind of doing it for my parents. I was kind of glad that it happened. So, am I doing it with my kids? Not really. My wife was baptized LDS. She's kind of fallen away from that as well. My daughter, she gets exposed. In this valley, pretty much 50% LDS. So you're going to get a lot of exposure to that. A lot of her friends are that.
yeah,
And I said, if she wants to do that, if she wants to go to LDS church, Catholic church, whatever she wants to do, I'm very supportive of that. You can decide your own trajectory as far as that goes.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to see not funny, it's a reoccurring theme that always seems to come up, especially when faced with death and loss,
Yeah.
right? It forces you to kind of take a step back and think about life. And some people are directed towards that, and some people just have this ingrained sense of faith
Yeah. And
that
that's
comes.
great, man. If that works for you and that keeps you going in the right direction and gives you the strength you need, then that's fine. We haven't gotten to this yet. I had that brother that passed away, but my mom actually passed away at an early age. She had a non-cancerous tumor on her bowel that they removed, and she got a C. diff infection in the hospital.
Okay.
And so she ended up passing away at 53. I was 32 at the time, so this would be like 2007.
Yeah.
So that was kind
You
of
were here in Salt
I
Lake.
was here in Salt Lake. I was actually here training at Excel.
Wow.
So that kind of, my whole family, that my mom, or as with most people, the mother of the family is kind of the cornerstone, the hub, the thing that kind of keeps everything together. So that kind of unexpectedly happened. And so that really changed, made our whole family kind of pivot. It didn't push us back into religion or anything, although when my mom was buried in the Catholic Church, she was still an active Catholic, but it did change a lot of things for my family.
Yeah. Well, go back to that. So, if you wouldn't mind, go back to you talk about a change in your family at the previous time when your oldest brother had passed.
Yeah.
What happened? Was it the dynamic within the family? Like, I'm assuming that the degree of disability your brother had was probably something really consuming. It sounded
Yeah,
like he
it was
was.
consuming, and that was another thing. It's like with my parents being in the situation they were at, having a young family. My dad had to work; he wasn't making a lot of money. My mom had to work, but she had a full time, a disabled kid to take care of. So we had to place him in care of, a hospital that could, that specifically took care of those kind of individuals. So
Okay.
that was hard on them.
Yeah.
Then we passed. That was hard. My mother, my dad, they still to this, well, my mother, she never recovered from that, but my dad still to this day, your brother, he talks about it all the time, and it just weighs on a parent.
How so? Like, what does he bring up? Just stories of your
Yeah,
brother,
just
or his
stories, how,
regret, or
what he would be doing now, how happy he would be, just the things that both he and my mom are both missing out. My mom
yeah,
wasn't around to see the birth of my kids, my marriage. So
yeah.
it's a tricky thing, man. And you wish they could be here for those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a difficult thing.
Well, they do. I mean, they are carried. I guess your father's carrying them on and reminding you and
Yeah, that's
giving you some inference as far as what their opinion or how much they'd like to see your children now or
yeah,
where
and
at.
that's kind of the thing. My wife's like, "Well, don't you believe? Don't you think?" And it's like, dude, you know what? My mom gave me so many great memories. things that were unique to her, things that were, everybody in my circle that remembers like what was unique about her. So when you have people keep talking and bringing it up, it's like, that's, the way of, recognizing her, memorializing her,
Yeah.
when you just kind of, the conversation has never really stopped.
Yeah.
So we feel like that's a great thing. Like she did a lot of good things, and that's how she's still a part of us.
Yeah. Well, it's your initial word. It wasn't imprinting. It was something like that when you're talking about your father and exercise and working out. And the more I sit down with people, the more I realize just how much of our personality or who we are and our values are really a subsect of the people that we've interacted with.
Yeah.
And so then if that's a mindset, then to another degree, you really never lose anyone.
Yeah.
Because there's elements of them that impacted who you are that are now with you forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it be good or bad,
Yeah.
you're carrying.
Yeah, and they're always going to be the good and the bad.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's go back to training a little bit.
Okay.
So last we left off, you had gone through, you again, using your persistence, kind of like your initial. I just keep going back to when you're talking about wrestling and just getting your head ground into the ground and persevering through that and finding success because you knew you were the coach's son. So you had to put your best in. So here you were again, you had faced rejection with the pharmaceutical, you decided personal training, you came out here, you faced some rejection, and then you faced more rejection in a place you were told you should probably go to.
Yeah.
Almost, it sounds like the previous stop was like, hey, you're too qualified to be here. So then you try and get involved in Excel, and through perseverance, you were finally afforded an opportunity.
Yeah.
So what was going on then?
Well, yeah, it was kind of, I came into this facility, and it was, it was busy. It was the new hot thing in town. It had probably already been open for like a year and a half.
Okay.
And so it was just popping. There was a ton of money coming in here. People are signing up left and right. The traffic was great. But we were a subcontracting company within Excel, so it wasn't necessarily Excel's personal trainers. So I don't really. The head trainer was a guy named Tim Mezowitz, and he was actually really good. He would do, team seminars. He would educate us, and he was up to the current science and what was going on, the periodization, the programming, everything. So he would relay that to us as far as the general population. I came from the athletic world,
Right.
Strength conditioning, collegiate. So in NSCA, you're all about, linear periodization, these percentage based. Let's find a 1 rep max. Your rest periods are this. And then you start working with a, 60-year-old woman that's had a hip replacement
Yeah.
that wants to bitch about her husband.
Yes.
You're like, well, how are we going to find this woman's 1 RM on a back squat? So pretty much it's like everything that you've learned, kind of out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of, it was like a hell of a learning process. So I was glad that I had Emmett and Tim to kind of point me in the right direction. One thing that I did that was pretty unique, and I really felt like it helped me build my business. I built just like a 1-page resume. I just did it myself.
Okay.
They didn't have a sales book or anything. Like we have our pictures up here on the wall.
Yeah.
They didn't have any of that. So I made this thing, put my face on it, put a little Wyoming cowboy. I had my master's, like my degree, my background, and then I laminated it. And then I gave one to each of the salespeople. So they would just have one.
Yeah.
And so they would just, if they were talking about personal training, that was the only one they had.
Yeah.
And so they would just slap it up there.
Nice.
So very quickly, man, I went from being like not having any clientele to being fairly busy.
That's great.
Yeah. So, but it's personal training, man. If you think you're going to come into it and making a lot of money, it's like, it's hard and it takes a while to build clients. You're having a lot of people turn over on you. I mean, I had a piggy bank from the time I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
It was this big beer bottle that I'd put coins in it. So I had it from the time I was a little kid to college to graduate school, and I'd brought it down here with me. It was time to cash in that piggy bank because I had no money.
Yeah.
And it was like, you could only be so busy, but I wasn't making the kind of money I needed. And I was just like, so then again, here came like, well, let's try to get another sales job. Let's try to do something else. And at the meantime, I was actually donating plasma 3 days a week to make ends meet, buy gas. And then I come in here and work out, and you have this thing all around your workout partner's like, "What are you doing, dude?" Like, you're probably not supposed to work out. You're gonna blow a gasket, but dude, that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
And then success started coming, started building a clientele. And then, I didn't have to do that stuff anymore. But then again, I felt like it, cashing in my piggy bank, donating my blood, kind of just, helped me rise up to where I needed to be. And then,
Doing whatever you needed
yeah.
to.
And we had a lot, and I hate to say it, we had a lot of mediocre trainers here at the time.
Okay.
And so, but there were some really good ones as well. Tim, Emmett, Stewart, there was a lot of guys that we really started stepping up our game. We took the education really serious and how to work with general population. And, everything was pretty new in the early 2000s. It was kind of the beginning of the internet. There wasn't a lot of information.
Right.
There wasn't really, who was pointing in the direction of how to exercise. There was the NFCA, there was ACE, NASM was fairly a new thing.
Yeah.
But there was,
And they were the best
Yeah,
at that time, but very few people didn't really know about them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, there was Paul Check. I really feel like he
Czech
was,
Institute.
yeah, the Czech Institute. He was one of the guys in the early 2000s that kind of really bridged the gap between, the physical therapy and the science and, the personal training realm. And I felt like he merged the two.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us were actually really drawn to him and kind of his methodology and his programming and the kind of the way he did things. So a lot of us pursued that. And I actually feel like NASM kind of built their whole foundation off of the basics that he put out there.
Okay.
So so a lot of us got certifications in NASM. We also studied the Czech protocol. So that gave us a good basis, and I felt like it got us to rise up. And a lot of the mediocre trainers that were kind of hanging on kind of just dissipated. And then we started bringing on and that's what kind of brought up the next thing was, I was one of the busiest guys, and, the percentage was really low. And I was performing. I was always asking for a little bit more money, because I was one of the top producers, and it just wasn't there. So that's one bad thing that if I could take it back, I wish I would have. I pretty much told the training manager at the time that if he didn't give me a little more money, I was going to leave. And he's there's no more money to give. So I left. And then I took my clients with me. And I feel like in hindsight, I feel like that was pretty disrespectful for a guy that took me onto his staff. Help me, educate me, develop me. I feel like I was just still young, naive, maybe a little bit egotistical, and then in hindsight,
because they become your clients, right?
Yeah, but
the same thing with group fitness. You see it a lot where it's like you build this community following and you're the focal point, right?
Yeah.
So it naturally starts to happen where your head and your ego get inflated because you have to be that to your clients. You feel the pressure to be the expert and to be the one who has the solution and who's helped them. So then when you're faced with these other things, you then say, oh, well, I have these clients. I can, my following.
Yeah. Right? And, since I'm the old training manager, I've spoken with him and I've apologized. Like, I was just young. I was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. There should have been a better way to have done that. Maybe we could have both came up with something to, generate more revenue, and that would have helped me out and it would have helped you out as well, versus just, turning my back and walking away.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening there is, with that subcontracting that was within Excel, that dissipated. And then Josh, our owner, Josh Smith, he wanted to start his own training team. And so he reached out to me and he wanted me to be help out with the personal training program, be the education director. So, so pretty much my role was to start training the other trainers and also help leading and managing them as well. So I came back, started helping out with that. And things.
Where did you go in the interim? Did you go to?
I went to a small gym up. I went to a small gym up in Olympus Cove.
Okay.
It was in the area. I had a lot of clients that it wasn't too far of a hassle. So I went up there for about a year.
Okay.
And then I came back to Excel, and we went in house at Excel, built up a hell of a program. And then there were some changes. Then I felt like I was hitting a ceiling again. 2004, 2005. Wanted to try to, if I'm going to push it, I'm going to try to push it right now. So started looking for other opportunities, searching around, came across a facility down in Scottsdale that they were thinking of opening. It was going to be, so there was two guys that started NASM, Dean Kumanzis and Michael Clark. One was an orthopedic surgeon, one was a physical therapist. Okay. So Dean Kumanzis was an orthopedic surgeon down in Scottsdale. He broke off and wanted to start this performance gym. And so I interviewed to be the head trainer for 2 years, and I ended up getting that job. And in the meantime, my mom passed away. So there was, mom passing away, hitting a ceiling at Excel, felt I wanted to change,
Yeah.
bounced to Scottsdale, 2007, 2008.
Okay.
And then the economy, as you know, when the economy went south, it went south pretty much in Vegas and in Scottsdale, or in Phoenix first.
Really?
That was the first place where things started really. So all of our outside investors, which were a lot of construction guys, we had a grand opening on a Friday. On Monday, the very next Monday, the investor said, we're pulling the plug.
Holy cow.
So yeah, so I worked hard to build this whole infrastructure, all these programs, get this facility ready to go. And we had it all outfitted, ready to go. And in the meantime, I was training, the orthopedic surgeon. He had a lot of clients that were doing therapy and training and performance.
Okay.
So being in Scottsdale, I got to train a lot of professional athletes, individuals that worked with that orthopedic surgeon, but they pulled the plug down there. And so it was like, I'm sure I could have kept going down there and made it happen, but I had a house up here, I'd given all my clients away to everybody.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much, I knew I wanted to come back. I hightailed it back, and I pretty much started from scratch in 2000. And the economy was crappy here, shitty here too. So, giving all my clients away, that was my deal. I moved away. So it's not like I can just move back and be like, hey, yeah, I'm back. You're coming back to me.
Right.
That's not what happened. I did have some clients come back, and I'm grateful for that, but I just wanted to start fresh.
That's tough.
Yeah, it was tough. It was very difficult at the time. So
what was it? So when you come back, having been a senior therapist or a senior trainer, people knowing you, having a name here, so that all helped. What was the strategy though, day one, when you come back from Arizona?
Well, so what had happened was, unfortunately, we had an incident at the facility here at Excel where we had a trainer that put a client on a stability ball, and the stability ball burst.
Okay.
So there was a lawsuit involved, and it really showed the management got kind of upset with that they had a lot of legal ties to the personal trainers. We were their personal trainers.
Yeah.
So they wanted to create some separation. So then they created well, each one of you guys, if you want to train in here, you're just going to pay rent now. Mm-hmm. So we went to the rent system. So then we had, 15, 16 trainers all paying rent. So it was like each of us were like a business operator within this facility.
Yeah.
So had that been any other facility and we hadn't really been working together as a unit, that could be really ugly if you're, if you just have a bunch of random people that don't really know how to coexist.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of egotistical trainers, trying to steal clients, lowball one another. You just don't, when you have that independent contractor culture, it's not the same as building a team that's, working for the business.
Yeah.
So we created a lot of separation when we did that. And, financially, the gym was not doing that great. So the training program was in disarray. The production of the gym was
down. That may be a fair understatement. I mean, I was a little part of that, right, for a period of time before I went to Park City. But there were days where it was regularly concerned if the doors were going to be open to the facility. Yeah, that was a tough time to be there.
Yeah, and so it was very uneasy, and we ended up having to bring some outside investment in to kind of help shore things up.
Yeah.
But the outside investment that we did bring in was like a grand slam hitter, and he pretty much just said, whatever you want to do with this facility, go ahead and do it. So ownership and myself, we kind of sat down. And, CrossFit had become a big thing. But even like as a personal trainer, when you start pricing out equipment back in the day, like this is early 2000s, like you're looking at a squat rack. A squat rack is going to cost you like $12,000.
Yeah.
When they would say, well, this thing's rated to hold 30,000 pounds. Well, who in the hell squats 30,000 pounds? So there were these big monstrosities. It's like the equipment wasn't really, feasible at the time, but then that Rogue Fitness popped up and you're like, well, hey man, these guys are making rigs that you can squat 10 people at the same time, and we have 4 squat racks here. Most gyms in the valley, if they were lucky, if they had 1 or 2. So if you're a true strength conditioning,
and there's usually a guy standing in there doing bicep curls.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like me personally, I try to lock down the squat rack all the time. But when we had this opportunity to kind of blow the gym out, we had the traditional layout of, selectorized equipment, row after row. And we wanted all that gone. We're going to put turf, make it more like a collegiate strength conditioning facility, turf down the middle, rogue rigs down the side, kettlebells, medicine balls, sleds, space to do, functional warm ups, agility,
Yeah.
speed, agility, quickness drills. So really, and when we did that, we're in Holiday, Utah, which is an aging population. We had an aging clientele here.
Right.
So when our aging clientele would walk in the door and see the remodeling that we were doing, and we're putting up squat racks and pull-up bars and, weightlifting platforms, they instantly thought like, well, this is a CrossFit gym now.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing. It's like, no, it's not a CrossFit gym. We will be offering CrossFit, but this is a strength conditioning gym. This is what you need more than anything.
Yeah.
And so, but it was just people had their walls up. They didn't like what was going on. They felt like machines were the best. And we were going after.
Where do I sit?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where's the place for me to sit and do this exercise?
Yeah. So
you have to change the whole mindset.
Yeah. We really had to try to educate them as much as we can. But once people have their mindset up, because a lot of times when you hear the word CrossFit, especially a middle-aged older person, they automatically think injury.
Yeah.
So that scared off a ton of people. And so we kind of had to reinvent ourselves. And, we did get a younger population in, which from a personal training standpoint, that's not necessarily the best population to build a clientele.
Yeah.
So there was a transition period where it was difficult. And now a lot of the people that drifted from the past have now drifted back, and they see the importance of it. It's like, yeah, man, because that's exactly it. It's like the older a person gets, the more specific strength conditioning you need.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't need to go, just like what you said, you sit on your ass all day. Why come to the gym and sit on your ass?
Yeah.
You need to be up, you need to be moving your body, you need to be working on stability, strength. They need the free weights more than anybody. And that's what I tell them.
100% agree. Yeah.
When you start telling them, it's like, when you're a 20-year-old dude, you can eat cheeseburgers and do bicep curls and you're still going to look great and feel great. But when you're a 60-year-old man, that doesn't work anymore.
Well, even putting on your pants, putting your socks on, tying your shoes, and you're only going to be able to do that with space.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to become efficient at that sitting down.
Yeah, so it's really, kind of, and that's the mindset, you brought this up to me as well, is that when you're a young trainer, you come into this realm and you're thinking like, oh yeah, dude, I'm going to be training every one of the Utah Jazz. I'll be training these high school kids, this and that. And then you quickly realize like, that's a hard client to get, and that's a hard client to keep.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you do get that client, is that even a client that you want to work with? Mm-hmm. Like, now that you have that professional athlete, is that what you want to do?
Well, and then the level of progression that you can see from taking someone who wasn't inclined to working with them over a long period. Because at the end of the day, like, another point I'd like to go into too is like long-term training. Like, for trainers, you start off and you say, okay, I'm young, I'm in good shape, I can teach people how to train. Then you eventually learn that's not what it's about. But then you also got a secure business. And you personally are planning on being a trainer for X amount of years.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? And how do you show value to where someone who trained with you a year ago is still training with you the following year and the following year?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have clients now where they've been with you for a decade.
Yeah.
And the maturation and the process that they went through, like where they've come from to where they are.
Yeah.
Like, I get comments all the time. I train the two ladies here, right?
Yeah.
And everyone knows who they are. And the things that I have them doing in their 60s, most people are kind of wowed by.
Yeah.
But when I first started working with them, their coordination and basic skills and abilities were very poor.
Yeah.
To be frank.
Yeah.
And they'll even accredit that they're in much better dynamic shape and just ability, like as far as balance and things like that, how it impacts all their life. So as a trainer, like, there comes a point where you start to realize, oh man, I can't be doing effectively the same thing and just taking people through this explosive workout. You realize that there's a plan. If you're going to be a trainer for 20, 30 years, you have to have a plan that could incorporate for a client for 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, and that's the thing that kind of, in the past, you're like, well, training an athlete, there's so many different variables that you can do all these, you can do Olympic lifting, you do all this dynamic stuff, you do sprint work, this and that. But it's like, when you start looking at a person like, well, okay, now my client, they need a knee replacement. Now they need a hip replacement. Well, now, something's going on with their heart. All the different variables. It's just, it just kind of changes your whole mindset. Well, now, being the problem solver in the past with, sports and performance, you're being a problem solver for, an aging adult.
Yeah.
Keep them moving, keep them doing the things that they want to do.
Yeah.
I want to keep golfing. I want to keep playing tennis, well, then it's actually a lot harder to keep those people moving in the right direction than, a young athlete. So it is more challenging. It is more technical. You have to know a lot more of you have to apply, a lot more of that knowledge that, prevention, rehabilitation of injuries. A lot of that stuff comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just going to do a 24, 48 hour certification and know how to work with these people with, all these limitations.
Yeah.
And that's, with a lot of my clients, I remember, the way that most trainers get clients is, they fill out a lead sheet. What are they looking to do? How old are they? What injuries do they have? So these things, they weren't even really divvied out back in the day. They were just kind of laying around. So everyone that I could find, I would just snake. And I just, clients that I have 24 years later, I remember my initial conversation with them.
Wow.
Just me personally, like, I would sell 12 sessions for $400. And I'm like, hey, who in the hell is going to spend $400 for 12 sessions to hang out with me? I'm like, I couldn't believe it. So when I would try to sell, be like, yeah, man, I would pretty much talk myself out of a sale. I know it's a lot of money. And these people would be like, yeah, I'll try it out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this person's going to actually sign up for 12 sessions with me.
Yeah.
And, and it just kind of gave me that confidence, that build, and so I would make sure, like, as a new trainer, I would do, all the circumference measurement, percent body fat. And then in my mindset, I was like, by that 12th session, I'm going to have them build muscle. I'm going to have, weight loss. They're going to lose body fat, circumference measurements. And so at that 12th session, I would redo every measurement just because I had to validate what I was doing, and it was worth it. And then, I would say, everything is going in the right way. Let's keep it going. And then, I thought for sure they weren't going to sign up a second time.
Yeah.
And then they signed up a second time. And, and those same people that I was worried about, I'm training them, 24 years later.
Yeah.
And, things have changed. We're not doing the same workouts. I'm not the same trainer, but the relationship has probably never been better. And that's, you really become such a big part of these people's lives. And then, that's another thing. It's like when you talk to people from the outside looking in, when you sit down at dinner or whatever, they're like, so you're a personal trainer? So what do you, and then they say the same thing. So did you take like a weekend certification course and stuff like that? Yeah. And, so you kind of get a lot of that stuff. And so you really you almost discredit yourself a little bit, but then you start developing relationships with these people, and they start confiding in you and telling you, like, dude, this is the best money I've ever spent. Like, this is what, gives me energy. It keeps me going. It's kept me young. So you keep hearing that from all these different people. And it's like, man, it really gives you a self, like a lot of self-worth. Like, hey, man, I am important. This is a good job.
Yeah.
I am one of the big, and you really feel like you're starting to integrate with them, personally.
Yeah.
They're almost become part of their family.
You're right.
Because you look at the time spent with a lot of these people.
I've been to plenty of Christmases and Thanksgivings.
Yeah, dude, exactly.
I've been invited to party. Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Like my parents raised me for 18 years. I've been training these people for 24 years. Yeah. So I hate to say it, but a lot of these people even know you better than your own parents. Yeah. And you, unfortunately, know them better. Like when you stare at a person for hours on end, you can just look at them instantly. And I've told my wife this, like, this job gives you an insight to read people. You can instantly tell just by the look on their face what's wrong. Yeah. And then they spill the beans, like, this is what's wrong. So, it is like we're supposed to be working in the physical realm, mobility, strength, but I hate to say it, sometimes you're working on emotions, mental status.
I wouldn't say sometimes. I'd say that becomes the vast majority of the job.
Yeah. And I hate.
And you don't realize at the point. That's why I love that you're getting into this, because you don't realize at the point when you come into this what the actual position is and what you're going to be doing. And then, because you talked about working with an athlete, like, well, athletes have a regiment. You're supplementing and improving what they're doing. Most of the people that you're going to see and build a clientele that are get involved in this, you're seeing like 2-3 times a week, right? And so you're having 2-3 hours of influence versus all the rest of the hours of the day. And you're trying to fix things like what's going on with their back, their knee,
Yeah.
these issues. It's incredibly difficult because during that time, while you're there trying to put them through the motion, you're also trying to instill in them what they should be doing when
Yeah.
they're not with you.
Yeah.
And you basically have to impress upon them like they'll be successful if they can do this outside of this location,
Yeah.
outside of the gym. And that's the hardest thing because you're not there.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's like, I mean, but that's part of the deal too. It's like you can influence these people for years on end,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, 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 and then all of a sudden something happens, like whether it's something relationship wise, or they're like, all right, well, that kind of helped them push them a little bit more in your direction. But then they start seeing some success. They're like, hey, maybe this, So everybody's entry point on how serious they want to get is, I would say, it's different for everyone.
Mm.
But that's the thing. It's like, well, we'll keep pushing you in that direction till we get a response.
Yeah.
And if we don't get a response, and you're just keep, kind of cruise controlling along, well, then that's better than not being here.
Yeah.
So
What was it like? So, at what point in your career did you start to figure that out? Like when you just talked about the circumference measurements and selling the 12 packs.
yeah.
At what point in your career did you realize and you had to start making this shift on, was it a gradual or was there like an awakening point where you kind of figured it out? Or how did that transformation happen?
You could see it, like the clients, like when I was always just every 12 session, like, this is where we're at, where are we going to be next? And they just said, you know what, we're heading in the right way. You don't need to do those measurements. I'm going to be here training with you for as long as you're going to be a trainer.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I'm like stepping away and not making that a priority, but we're still like, I don't feel like I have to, show my worth as much as
Right.
because they know it. I know it. We're both on the same path. We want to keep things working the way they are. We want to get some improvement along the way.
Yeah.
Stress relief, there's a lot of the reasons why people exercise is, some do it for their head, some do it for their bodies, some do it because their parents make them. There's a lot of different reasons why people exercise.
Yeah. But I mean, for you, when the light goes off for you as a trainer, when you started to understand, one, I get you're talking about developing, like identifying your self-worth and not having to prove that. And more so like instilling in yourself, like the value of training. But then in the other aspect of the maturation on your standpoint, where as far as what personal training really is.
Yeah.
And personal training is not just taking someone through a workout and not exercise.
Yeah.
It is being the coach. It is being the mentor. It is being the person who listens. So that transition.
Yeah, I would say that probably took place, there was that time, that transition period when my mother passed away and kind of moved away to Scottsdale. And I came back. I just really felt like, that I needed some change. Before I was doing, I'm not kidding, I would do sometimes like 70 to 80 appointments a week.
Yeah.
I would just train from 5 a.m. to like 8 or 9 at night, group sessions. And it was more about the money and the volume and kind of that competitive nature. We had a lot of heavy hitters back then, and I wanted to be the number one dog. So I would just work like a dog. And I felt like I kept my quality high, but I felt like it could be a lot better. So I really took a step back and said, I'm not going to do as much volume. I'm going to do a little more higher quality, fine tune my clients. I pushed a lot of individual clients into small groups, condense things.
Yeah.
Me personally, I like to talk. I love to talk to my clients. I love to engage with them, but sometimes you just want to get your job. You want to do the work.
Yeah.
Especially, there's men and women. As we know, females like to talk a little bit more. So generally not all the time yet, but I started putting a lot of groups together, females, males, and the camaraderie that was built in these groups, it was like almost me not having to hold them accountable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they were holding each other accountable.
Mm-hmm.
It was like it was like, hey man, this is a really good thing. Like the more people I get involved, they work together as a team. One person's kind of falling behind, the others will bring them up. You can kind of interject along the way, but when you have these pods of people, I always text my clients the night before, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow at 6 a.m. I've been doing that since I had a cell phone.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's really, at first I thought, well, this is going to drive people crazy. But when your clients are like, dude, that's one of my favorite texts, because all their buddies chime in like, yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys. They might send a funny,
Little
emoji
emoji
or
or something.
something,
Yeah.
something like that, a funny joke. And so they really get kind of excited and look forward to the next day.
Yeah.
And you as a professional, you don't have to worry about that, small talk as much anymore. You can like, this is what we're doing. This was our squat day, our horizontal push pull day. You can get things set up. You can focus a little more on all the metrics of everything, because now you're not having to, talk about, oh, what'd you do last night?
Yeah.
How's your daughter doing?
Keep the session
You
going.
care about that, but it's a lot better when, that's being taken care of. They're getting that need filled by somebody else, and you can focus on being a professional.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really where my training started to kind of step up a little bit. And at that point in time, when I was in my mid 30s, when I was a 20-year-old trainer, I'm just be like, look at these dumb bastards. These guys are almost 40 years old and they're a fucking personal trainer. Can you
Yeah.
believe that?
Yeah.
We'd be like, that guy's almost a 40-year personal trainer. Well, I'm almost a 50-year-old personal trainer now.
Yeah.
So, some of the older dudes like Emmett, who hired me initially, he's still going strong. He trains here. He's kind of reinvented himself. And, he says he wants to train until he's 80 years old.
I don't doubt it with that guy.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of, you look at that and the dude's almost, probably, I don't even know how old he is. He looks like he's 50, but he's probably in his 60s, and he's still doing good. He's still building his clientele, all of his client. So you look and see the people that came before you, and they're still making it happen. So it gives you confidence that you can make it happen as well. And I'll always tell like anybody that comes in this gym, like, have you worked with a personal trainer anywhere else?
Mhm.
They're like, oh yeah, I worked at, at Voss with this guy. How long had he been there? Well, he was their most seasoned trainer. He had been there for 2 years. We have a staff of, close to 15 people, half of which have been here longer than I have.
Yeah.
So, part of that is the facility. We love the facility. They've made personal training kind of the hub of the gym.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around us. Nate's given us a lot of support, all the equipment we need. It gives us, that established base that, people when they come in, especially an older individual, like, well, yeah, this is James. He specializes in training people with disabilities and older adults. He has one client that's 94 years old. She's probably going to be training with us till she's 100 years old.
Yeah.
So, when you start explaining this, like, oh yeah, this is a guy that works with hips, low back. This is our shoulder expert. This is our guy that works with young athletes. He's been here for 10 years. Instantly when you start saying that kind of stuff, people just feel like this is where I need to be. They're going to take good care of me. They take this serious. This isn't a part-time thing for them. This is our full-time thing.
Mm.
So we do take a lot of pride in what we do. And, in this realm amongst all of us, we take it very serious in our education and our experience. We know that other trainers are watching us. And I mean, if you had a bunch of lackadaisical trainers that didn't care, then there'd be injuries and sloppy things happen all over the place, and lack of programming, lack of discipline, program adherence. So, when we're all on the same page and we all take pride in what we do, that's a good place to be. And everybody kind of elevates their game.
I think too, just with the evolution and the change in the gym, had you not had a team built like that, I don't think you would have been as successful with that transition. When you talked about that transition period, basically building this out to be a dynamic, really a dynamic setup that does mirror a CrossFit look, but really it's more how facilities really should be designed.
Yeah.
Where people can move.
Yeah. And that's, that Paul Chek said that. And that was one of the things that I remember. One of the first things I cracked his book. He said the gyms of the future will look like the gyms of the past. That's what he said. He's like, all the equipment, wall to wall, like all your selectorized machines, those will be gone. There'll be pull-up bars, rings. People will be working on calisthenics, body weight exercise, full body exercise, throwing medicine balls. And I mean, look where we're at now. 25 years later, that's exactly where we're at. Yeah.
So, well, let's try and bring this all back. We kind of went through a whole trip. We went through your life.
Yeah, I get carried away.
Growing up in Wyoming, your family, building a team here. Again, your model of perseverance is obviously something that someone who is looking to be in this field or someone who is a trainer in this field could really model. So what's some feedback, or what would be some lessons that you'd want someone to take away from this sit down? Uh, Someone who's potentially looking to build their personal training business, or looking to be even involved in the field. They're a collegiate athlete, is
Yeah.
looking for a direction and just got rejected by a pharmaceutical company. What kind of advice, what things would you want them to take away from this?
That this, it's like any profession, it's going to be, you're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to put in the hours. You're going to have people tell you no. The rejection, I mean, you're going to have a lot of rejection. But once you do, like if you put a good effort into, and I'm sure you know this as well, like there are certain people like catalysts that will come into your life. One of my very first clients was a dude that was in his mid 50s, had a little bit of a belly. His wife had just come off of breast cancer.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe I'll try this fitness thing. Well, that one guy and his wife were so integrated in this community that I did a good job with him, and then the sales was over. Every referrals was where it was at. So
Hmm.
that's only takes one person to kind of change your whole trajectory. So, giving everybody an opportunity, giving a best effort, that one person can build your entire clientele. And, and when that starts happening, when you start getting referrals, the sales, the nervousness of asking, when I was a young trainer, 12 sessions for $400, that's not there anymore. These
Yeah.
people they're coming in knowing what they're getting. And then at that point in time, your confidence is up. This is a referral. This person knows what I'm all about. Then you're asking them, 12 years later, 20 years later for 12 sessions for $1,200,
Yeah.
and you have the confidence. If you don't want this, somebody else will, but
Yeah.
I really want to work with you. So let's do this, so people get excited about that. But it does take time. And this, you don't, I would say, don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing. Like I'm a knee guy. I take care of knees. Just being open to working with anybody. People with disabilities. Older adult females. Young bodybuilder dudes. He's just like, don't limit yourself. That's what's fun about this job is it's not the same thing. Every hour is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be challenging in a different way.
Yeah.
So if you have a diverse clientele, that really kind of keeps you on your toes, mixes things up a little bit. But if you let it get repetitious and stagnant, then you're going to lose your love for it, and more importantly, your clients are going to lose the love for the what they kind of grew to love with you. So
Yeah.
you got to keep it fresh, you got to keep it new, you got to stay engaged, and you got to make sure, just like what we said, your client might get a little stagnant in their progress, and you might get a little stagnant in your training and your methodology as well. So
Yeah.
you got to personally, you can't rely on your client to jazz you up. You got to
You
you
got
got
to
to look
bring
at
it.
you got to
Yeah.
bring it yourself, and that's kind of what I like at the end of the day. You look at yourself. You look at it as like an athletic competition. You know what? At the beginning of the day, I got 10 appointments today. Well, at the end of the day, you can kind of look at yourself and grade yourself. Did you give a good effort?
Yeah.
What could you have improved on? And I feel like if you constantly giving yourself that feedback, you're going to keep improving. So, but it's a great profession. It's rewarding. I do feel like I'm a part of a lot of these people's family, and they tell you, all the time, like, this is the best money I spend. I look forward to this, and I look forward to the next time I see you, and I'm going to do this till you don't do it anymore, or I'm not around anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like when people start saying stuff like that to you, it really kind of it confirms like why you're here, why you're doing this. You are a big deal. You're making changes in these people's life, whether it's, I hate to say it, whether it's physical, emotional, mental. If you're making those changes, if you're making them a better person, then you're doing your job as a professional.
It's huge.
Yeah, it is. And it is a rewarding job. Like, and when you know, and I keep going back, like I just felt like I should have been something. I should have been selling real estate. I should have been selling something. But now it's like, okay, almost 50 years old, you're comfortable in your own skin. You know what you're doing. You know your trajectory, and you start having these conversations with the same guys that you sit down with. Your peers. They did those jobs. They did the desk job, and they're like, yeah, I made money, but I hated everything that I did about. Like I
Mm.
hated everything about my job. You enjoy your job. You get to be in a physical, like I get to come in here. It's a positive environment. Is it
Yeah, for
always?
sure.
Not always, but if people are coming to a gym to improve their lifestyle, they're generally they want to go in the right direction. So it is a positive environment.
Yeah.
So it's a great, if you have great people that work around you, then that's another benefit. You can learn from one another, share clients with one. I'm going out of town. Who's going to take my clients? We have that kind of relationship with one another. So it's a great work environment.
That's great. One last thing, though, you did touch on your kind of almost a maturation or a change in your training as well, going from working one-on-one to working within groups.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge, I know it's kind of the standard now, but at a point in time, it was like the thing
Yeah.
that people started to figure out. Like, not only was the productivity of the session better, it was more like you were monitoring, and as long as you did small groups, right?
Yeah.
Manageable small groups, then the cost for the client was significantly less. Your revenue was generally significantly more.
Yeah.
And it kind of worked out better on both ends.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, like when you discovered, and we'll use that as our wrap up, when you discovered kind of going to those small group training.
I mean, I came back from Arizona. I had no clients, and then you start going after people, and they're like, "Well, I can't afford to pay your full session price." Well, what can you afford? And then it was just like, well, I'll get this person, and then you get kind of nervous, like, well, I got this electrician that's going to work out with the stockbroker. What are they going to have in common?
Yeah.
And then there's this orthopedic surgeon that wants to work out the stockbroker and this electrician. Well, there's this wood guy, and then you put these groups together, and then it's like they're best friends now.
Yeah.
Guess who? All three guys are using the stockbroker. The stockbroker is getting his house built by the electrician and the wood guy.
Yeah.
And it's like they're hanging out on the weekends, and sometimes they exclude you. So it's like so it was good. You started just putting these pieces together and that transition, and you just saw how things morph and how much better it was. And you're like, this is the way I got to go. Now, that doesn't work for everybody. Some people do not want to do the group sessions, and that's also good as well. It's fun to do one-on-one sessions, but the groups, just like you said, man, it gives you a lot more bang for your buck. You can focus on your professionalism a little bit more, and it's an easier price point for a lot of people to enter.
Cool.
So, but it's been a great thing.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you for your time today. This was huge. This was great for me. It's, again, I've known you for over the years and watched the development and the maturation of the facility and the team.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of exposure to different facilities around the country, and this is one of the best ones. This is the best one I've ever been at, for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the stronger teams that I've ever seen in person.
Thanks for saying that.
I mean that.
Yeah.
And so I just want to thank you for what you do here and what you bring to the community.
I
here.
appreciate that. Thanks for being part of the team for as long as you have.
Yeah, I've been kind of just the quiet old guy in the background who comes in every now and then.
Doing the little funky warm up.
Yeah, right. That's my thing.
That's his thing.
So thank you for sitting down with us today.
Thanks, Juan.
I appreciate it. Yeah.